When did you first hear about the project, and what made you interested in being a part of it?
Well, we had sports experience. I heard about it, and I'm going to think late 1988. At some point, I think it was in late 1988 or very early 1999, they issued an RFP for construction management services. The Stadium Authority did. And we had sports experience. We had done, at that point, 2 stadiums plus some renovations at college stadiums. And there wasn't a huge amount of stadium construction in the 1980s. So our experience was probably as good as most people at that point in time. And by the way, both of those stadiums are now out of use, and I think one of them has been demolished.
As project manager, what were your main responsibilities during the process?
There's 2 phases to it. In the pre-construction phase, I did a lot of the planning and how the construction would progress, from site clearing, demolition, stadium construction, renovation of the warehouse, renovation of the Camden train station, and estimating what's it all going to cost. And then another part of it, as the plans were developed, because we did it in phases, was to solicit bidders, set up the bid documents, set up the contract documents, and then work with HOK in terms of keeping it in budget and maintaining schedule.
Do you remember the time that you first visited the site?
Well, when I first visited the site, it was probably in early 1989, and it was a warehousing district of some of which was defunct. For example, the ice storage facility one of the first things we demolished was abandoned at that point. And there were a number of other residences that had already been demolished, whether that was part of this project or been done independently. I'm not entirely sure, or I've forgotten one or the other.
Do you remember when your work on the project officially began?
I'm pretty sure it was in early 1989.
Early 1989,
Yeah.
when it wrapped up?
Well, projects don't stop at substantial completion. They keep going for a while. So I think we opened in April. We had I don't remember what opening, I don't go to that many baseball games, so I don't remember what opening day was, but we had a soft opening, an exhibition game, and that might have been in early April 1989. But then to close out the contracts, settle claims, and do everything else we needed to do to wrap it up was probably another 4 or 5 months.
And when you were working on the project, what did the typical workday look like when construction had already undergone?
Was starting?
Yes.
Well, because it was being done in phases, Tom Rogers was doing a lot to look after the day-to-day construction. And I kind of, I was the project executive, so Tom reported to me, and then he and I together reported to Bruce Hoffman and to Kim McCullough at the Stadium Authority. And during the pre-construction phase, I was doing everything I had described a few moments ago, getting bidders on board, interviewing them, going through how to go about selecting the contractors with Bruce, assembling all the bid documents with HOK, keeping it within budget. And then as construction proceeded, I guess I kind of looked ahead. What's our next challenge? How do we deal with this problem? But Tom was an extremely good builder, so even though it was a full-time job for me, Tom was played a very significant role in getting it built.
Obviously, the B&O warehouse was a big part of it. We'll go into more of that later. But when you first started working on the project, did you know that the design was going to be built around features that were there, or did you think that it was going to be significantly changed over time?
I didn't know. Almost every stadium at that point was, including the stadiums we built, was multi-purpose, baseball and football. There were the few that were one sport only in baseball were the old stadiums. At that point, Wrigley Field, I don't remember where the Phillies were playing at that point, whether it was their old stadium or the Tigers were in their old stadium. But the ones that were most prominent in the minds of, I think, Larry and Janet were Fenway Park and Wrigley Field. But I didn't know it when we got on board that that's what they wanted to do.
When you took the job and throughout the process, you mentioned that you had prior experience with stadium work.
Our company did. My
Right,
personal
right.
experience was mostly in healthcare.
Right. So that's not very common for most of the other people we've interviewed. So when you took this job on and throughout the process, did it feel like it was just another job, or did you
Oh,
sense
no.
it could be a lot more?
It increased my understanding of the importance of the project and the firmament of stadium work and its importance to the city increased progressively as the work progressed. For me, it was an extremely important project, and probably, and I continued working for another 20 years after that. But I had more fun on this project, and I enjoyed it more. And it was I made some mistakes, but in terms of my overall experience there, it was the capstone of my career.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago, you talked about Kim McCollum, Bruce Hoffman, Larry Lucchino, some of these people. Kim McCollum, Bruce Hoffman were two people that urged us to speak with you. They basically were they both said you were instrumental to the project. Could you talk about what it was like working with those two, and then also some of those other people you mentioned, Larry Lucchino, Jeremy Smith?
Yeah. Let me start with Kim and Bruce. Bruce had come down from New York, and he had been running a fairly significant agency in the New York State government. I don't remember if it was hospitals or whatever it was, but it was something like that. And the governor, and I think it was Schaefer at that point, brought in a guy who wasn't effective. Mark can probably remember who he was, but I don't. And then they went out on a search and brought in Bruce. And Bruce is one of the most straightforward, straight shooters I've ever met. And he allowed me to do my work, took my advice in certain matters, not everything. Bruce had a lot more to do with the politics of the project, which were not insignificant. I had nothing to do with them, and he was just a class act to work with. Kim was the same way. She's up at, I want to say, Morgan State now, and she's a class act, and I really enjoyed working with her. And we've maintained our friendship over this entire time.
And then when it relates to people who were more so on the Orioles side, Larry Lucchino, Janet Marie Smith, David Ashton, do you have a particular experience with them? Yeah,
there was another one, and I'm going to have to remember his name. It was the guy who was responsible for their technology, the scoreboard, the sound system, and Eli Eisenberg, if you've ever heard that name before. He was, Larry was the muscle behind Janet. So as we were negotiating our way through the design, which was a negotiation, Janet's got a strong personality. She's also knows what she wants. I was obviously guided by Larry, and I'm still friends with Janet. And it turned out that she had it nailed. She did a really good job. And she made some accommodations to allow us to get it done near or on budget. And although she presented a couple of challenges, on time as well. There are a couple of funny stories about that part of it.
I was actually going to ask you that next. Were there, well, you just answered that, the times that you did think you guys wouldn't make a deadline or wouldn't make budget, what were some of the issues that kind of...
Well, there's two that come to mind immediately. Is one, we had awarded the steel contract, and because it was a steel frame stadium, the coating, the paint, is extremely important. And Janet had a difficult time reaching a conclusion on what green to use. So my steel fabricator on one side is beating the hell out of me to make a decision, because the process of doing it is this was done in CAD/CAM, computer, with an automated process. Then I would cut the steel and with using the computer-aided manufacturing. But at that point, in order to get a lasting coating, and I'm pretty sure they've probably painted the stadium 2 or 3 times since then, you had to what's called shot blast it. And there are different degrees of shot blasting, but the shot blasting we were doing took it to a near silver gray appearance. You almost never see steel like that, because the day after you do it, it'll start rusting again. But in order to start painting the steel, we had to get a decision on the color. Painting it wasn't that big a problem. Getting it through the shot blasting operation and then painting it, that was the complete cycle. Janet was having a hard time making up her mind on the color. So she said, okay, this is a possibility, but it doesn't have this characteristic. This is a possibility, but it doesn't have this characteristic. So we used Valspar as a painting supplier. They had a very good coating, and I think most of the manufacturers have come up with their own variations on it. And their representative was a young female whose name I've long forgotten, who really wanted to make the sale, because this is a big deal for her and for her company. And I had an absolute deadline where I had to tell the fabricator on Monday morning what the color was. So it was a Friday afternoon, and I called her up and said, look, here's what we got. So you need to mix these coats and get 3 samples painted, and then we can move on. Well, she said, well, tomorrow's Saturday. I can't get a painter. And I said, have you ever painted? So she came down and painted the samples. Janet improved it, what is now Camden Yards Green or whatever it's called, and we were off to the races in that one. Another one was the foul ball net. I don't know if you've heard this story at all, but the Orioles, Janet couldn't make up her mind what she wanted for a foul ball net. So the standard Major League foul ball net didn't appeal to her. So she said, let's get a fishing net. So we brought on fishing net to do the work. And when we started putting it up, it was too white, too shiny, too distracting for her. So we took it down, folded it neatly, and put it in the green groundskeeper's quarters underneath the stadium seating. We come in the next day, and it's covered in dirt and all twisted up because she wanted to dull the finish on it. So that foul ball net wasn't going to get hung. So we ended up going with a fairly standard, if I recall correctly, a fairly standard Major League net. And then the next issue was that when you're viewing it from the owner's box, Larry wanted it lowered. I'm up on a lift about 20 feet in the air where where we're stringing the cable. Larry wanted it lowered so it didn't interfere with his sight line looking out at the pitcher. But the lowest Major League net at that point, I'm going to throw a figure out, was 20 feet. And I didn't care what Larry said. It was not going to be more than 20. It was going to be at least 20 feet off the ground. So Larry approves it, and it's down 3 or 4 inches from 20 feet. It is a liability issue, obviously. So Larry disappears, and I say, jack it back up. And I don't know where it is now, but that's where I put it. And then another one was, I think it was a day or two after that, we had the soft opening where I don't know who came in to play a baseball game with a limited attendance. But when a baseball comes off the bat, it has topspin on it, and it's like a. So I told the Orioles, I asked them not to seat anybody in the section immediately below the press box, because that's where these guided missiles would end up. And they didn't, which is good. And then, but I ended up sitting there to make sure no one migrated up into the stands. After that, we got it up and it was fine.
So such cool stories. We were gonna ask you about that foul ball story because we read about it.
Oh yeah, I think I told the Sun did a feature not that long ago, and I think I told that story for them. But other issues, I wasn't that enthusiastic about keeping the warehouse. It required a ton of renovation. I don't remember what the bay sizes was, maybe 20 by 20, 25 by 25. But it had been used for a long time for very heavy materials, palleted materials. So when you were at the columns, sometimes in some of the areas, there was a 6-inch drop within that area, which is not suitable for furniture. So we had to compromise between how much fill can we put in there and how much could we let it, how much curvature could we tolerate to allow the furniture to sit with any degree of fidelity. The outside, the masonry was completely, the brick was in pretty good shape. The mortar was in terrible shape. So I ended up repointing, which is to chip out the mortar right at the joint, virtually in fact, it was the entire building. And then we had to find a window manufacturer who would give us what we wanted. And I'm pretty sure it was Pella that did that. And they did a nice job for us. At the end of the day, it's a great building. Is it the most efficient office space layout on earth? Absolutely not.
It's like you're reading our minds. Like the next question that we were going to ask you, go right into answering. So that's perfect. I'm going to turn it over to Henry over here.
All right, you can ask some questions. Good.
Good. So we'll turn it over there.
So you're talking about parking. Obviously, Camden Yards was one of the first stadiums integrated into a city.
Yes.
Was there problems with parking, and did you have to find spaces for people to be able to drive into the stadium?
Yeah, I'll tell you. RK&K did the civil engineering for the project, which is basically the parking and the drives and how the traffic would flow. And David Wallace was a principal for RK&K, and he did a magnificent job. In fact, some of the stadiums I did subsequently to Camden Yards, the parking solutions weren't as good as the one he came up with. And it was not just the parking, it was how do you get people on, what is that portion that comes into Baltimore? I haven't been up there in a while. Is it 295 or some 95? He integrated it with that. He integrated with the rail system, and the whole design was just magnificent. And I was a delight to work with him.
Right. So,
but in the parking, I think the Orioles want a garage now. I don't know for sure, and they want to develop some of that lot in the south. I haven't paid much attention to this next development phase, but the parking was as good as you could do given that site, and then they made arrangements for off-site parking with some of the adjacent lots and garages.
Absolutely. So, just to piggyback what you and Andrew were talking about a second ago with the B&O warehouse, we found a quote from you, and you were asked, did I appreciate what we were doing at the time in regards to the B&O warehouse?
I probably said no.
And like you said a second ago, you said, no, I did not. I mean, that feels like a passionate stance. Looking back, was there anything that you feel like you initially missed about the B&O warehouse? And then what are your thoughts on
Well, again, I mean, the B&O Warehouse adds an immense amount of character to Oriole Park at Camden Yards. But again, is it the most efficient warehouse in the world? Absolutely not. For office purposes and for banquets, it isn't. I'll go adamantly say that. If you, it's been used quite well, but it's just not as efficient as if we had come up with a slightly different plan.
And you speak of efficiency. We took a tour there a couple months ago, and the kitchen for all of the concessions across the stadium was in the basement of the B&O warehouse. Was it like that when you
That's what
began the project?
Yeah, the kitchen was there. Trying to remember, did we do a tunnel? I don't think we did a tunnel, but I don't remember anymore. And all the concession stands are obviously on that walkway between the warehouse and the stadium, and then in the stadium itself. So and I think we did build a bridge across to the club level, if I remember correctly. So it worked out. I've done other stadiums. Was the kitchen done exactly that way? No, absolutely not.
So obviously Camden Yards is a stadium really unlike any other at the time, especially.
At that time, yes.
At that time, of course. Was there a moment where you were sitting at some seat in the stadium and you realized how special the B&O Warehouse was? I just want to kind of read into
Well, the one experience we had, the Stadium Authority offices were in the warehouse. And subsequent to the Oriole Park, I teamed with Whiting Turner and we got the contract for the Ravens Stadium. And so we'd have a lot of our meetings in putting that project together up in the warehouse. And their conference room looked down over the baseball park, and in the afternoon games, we would, if there was a wild outbreak of cheering from the crowd, we'd all kind of migrate from the meeting over to the windows to see what was going on. So that part of it I do remember quite well. And then my company had its offices in the warehouse for several years.
I mean, honestly, I feel like not much work would be getting done.
Oh, we had work to do, but the crowd breaks into wild cheering. The 2 minutes it takes you to appreciate that and see what's going on, believe me, you do take advantage of it.
Right. And then how much input did you have in those meetings about whether or not to keep the stadium? And when you came onto the project, was it already decided that the B&O Warehouse?
No, absolutely not. I think Bruce asked us to look at both a new version and renovating the warehouse. I don't remember exactly. The Orioles wanted to keep the warehouse, and I've probably come to have a much greater appreciation for aesthetics than I did when I started that project. In fact, even in the course of it, I got more interested in the aesthetics. But at the beginning, it was a problem. What do you want? This is what it's going to cost. How long will it take to do it? That was my perspective at the beginning of the project.
So going through this process, and I'm just trying to get into your head with the decision to keep it or not. The B&O Warehouse is obviously such a big part of what the stadium is today, but it keeps that old feel.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That thought to mix the modern amenities that you have in the stadium today with that old B&O Warehouse, what were the challenges that came upon mixing between those two and trying to find the right balance?
You probably get a better answer out of the architect. My job at that point was, okay, you want to keep the warehouse. How do we make it a functional building, and how do we do it within a reasonable cost?
So we've been going back and forth on the B&O Warehouse for what seems like 10 minutes now, and there's so much to talk about with that. Were there any other parts to the stadium that needed these creative solutions, and was there anything that you look back to thinking that was a really tough part of the project?
One of the things I really liked about what I did, if you look at the facade of Oriole Park, there is it's actually precast concrete, but there's an architectural precast concrete, and it comes up to a fluted panel, and then above that, and including the arches, are brick. And it would have been cheaper to do, there's two types of brick, molded brick, manufactured brick. Manufactured brick looks really regular, it doesn't have a huge amount of character. Molded brick is irregular, it's pitted to a degree, and the Orioles wanted molded brick, which in retrospect, I didn't really care what they wanted to do, but I thought that using molded brick created some challenges because you can't precast the whole thing as an element. And precasting, if it had been manufactured brick, we could have manufactured those panels from top to bottom, laid the brick on the precast form, and then it would be done. What we ended up doing is we ended up manufacturing the panel, which included the arches in precast concrete, and then coming in and laying the brick afterwards. And given what we were asked to do, I thought that was a pretty creative solution. Another one, I don't think I've ever put this story quite out there, but this is a completely different subject. You may need to edit it out, but when we built Oriole Park, a company from Chicago named White Way Sign Company was the dominant provider of scoreboard systems. They'd done everybody. Working with Eli Eisenberg was really enamored of what they had done in other ballparks, and we toured around looking at different stadiums and their scoreboards and sound systems. And there was another manufacturer who at that point, Daktronics, who had just started entering the business. It just entered that portion of the business. They did a lot of electronic signs. And I looked at two systems. At that point, I think they were all using incandescent bulbs. It wasn't too long after that where everything went LED. But at that point, I talked to Eli, and they said, look, it's not about the bulbs. Anybody can do bulbs. It's about the software that's driving the bulbs. Eli took another look at it, and we ended up going with Daktronics, and I think we were their first major league contract, and they've dominated the market ever since. There are some others now, but so that I'm going to guess they've had 2 or 3 different scoreboards and video boards in there. It's too much information for my taste now. It's just too much going on. But I have a technical background, so sometimes I'll look at stuff and see it differently than someone who's immersed in another aspect of work will see it, and I think that was an area where I made a contribution.
You talk about the software of the bulbs, and I just want to understand that. Was that decision based on solely function of the lighting in the stadium, or did you think that
flexibility? You could do a lot more with good software. Now that making the selection now, it's more complicated because everybody's got LEDs. Where you buy, who you have your relationships with in terms of buying your LEDs, the colors are the issue. But at that point, it was primarily the software, in my mind, was the biggest factor in making that judgment.
Obviously, with the amount of opinions circulating in the room, it felt like there must have been some discussion about different things. Were there any disagreements between you and your workers or the groups about the features of the stadium?
Within my team? Mm-hmm. No.
Everything ran smooth?
Yeah, pretty smooth. I mean, we're no different than any other organization. We had personalities. Tom had strong opinions, but I respected his opinions, and a lot of times I said, okay, that's how we want to do it, that's how we'll do it.
It seemed, this keeps coming up, time was such a huge factor.
Oh, absolutely.
If there was some sort of disagreement or you really couldn't decide between 2 opinions which way to go, how did you go about handling that in such a quick manner?
Well, Bruce was the ultimate decision maker. And Bruce, so I'd if it wasn't something solely within my team, I'd say, Bruce, here are our options. Here are the consequences of selecting any decision, any limb on this decision tree. Your call. Let me know. And then he'd probably go through a negotiation with the Orioles or just make the decision, but that was the process.
So Bruce worked as a part of the Maryland Stadium Authority.
He was executive director.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you implement these different design suggestions provided by the Orioles and other architects, and then while having to maintain the standards provided by Bruce and the rest of the Stadium Authority?
You know, Joe, from HOK, I'm having a senior moment. Joe Spear is quiet, but very influential in the design. And Janet Marie listened to Joe, not in every matter, but in a lot of matters. So Joe was often a key part of the decision-making process on aesthetics and what he wanted the stadium to look like. And so Joe would make suggestions or in a way that demonstrated that I really like this way of doing it, and I think it's the right way to do it. And Janet would often listen to him. Bruce would often listen to him. Joe and I, not in every instance, but often dialogued about what the options were, and he may have mislistened to me. You'll have to ask him that question, but it was working with Joe was an absolute pleasure. And he was a big factor in the design.
It seemed like you were a huge middleman, and you were one of the voices that translated, the Orioles' message between what the Stadium Authority needed to guarantee for the city of Baltimore. Did you ever get caught in some sort of crossfire between the two sides about which direction to go in, or
No.
was it pretty fluid?
I took my direction from Bruce. Now, Bruce may have been caught in the crossfire, but I never was. And Bruce was a decisive guy. I'd give him a recommendation, or he'd develop it in whatever way he did, and then he would negotiate it with the state, with the Orioles, and then we would proceed down that path.
So,
But I did have strong ideas on what was the right way to do something, the wrong way to do something. So I think I might have influenced him a little bit in that regard, but he was a decision maker.
So we know that obviously in order to put a stadium in a city, some small businesses have to go, and there were some sacrifices that people had to make for the long-term benefit of the Orioles.
Mm-hmm.
We heard that you were involved in the process of excavating Babe Ruth's father's tavern.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we knew where it was, and there was a team of archaeologists that the Stadium Authority was working with. So I don't remember if they came in first or if we had done some preliminary demolition, but they came in, and the big area where they found stuff was down in the in the outhouse, in the cistern below the outhouse, and they came up with a bunch of stuff, and so that was probably the extent of it. It was searching the area down below the excavation for stuff that I don't know where it's on display, probably in the Babe Ruth Museum, but that's where it was.
No. In our interview with Kim McCullough last week, she mentioned finding a flintlock gun during the excavation process.
I don't remember it, but I'm sure we did.
Now, it seemed like a lot of people had these stories about cool things they found.
Yeah.
Did you find anything?
Not that I remember. Finding stuff was not my primary concern. I wanted to get it out of there so we could build. So, glad you found it. Do whatever you want with it. Let's keep going.
Now, between you and me, Kim mentioned that along the way she would take almost like trinkets from the stadium just to remember her time and her experience with the Orioles, including, a cup of sand from the field, whatever it was.
Did I do that?
Did you do that? Any of that?
I'm trying to think. We had a hard hat, black hard hat with the Orioles single on that. I have that. The Orioles, there were, I have two of these guys. Ray Canega from American Seating, I think that's who did the seating, used them as samples for the Stadium Authority. Stadium Authority didn't need them or decided surplus them at some stage. And I said, do you mind if I take them? And they said no, so they're in my garage. And I use them every day to tie my work shoes on. But apart from that, I brought up some paper magazine articles and newspaper articles from the original construction that might interest you as long as you get them back to me.
We would love to see that.
Okay.
Yeah. So just kind of backtracking, you talked about you had an exhibition game before opening day, just to make sure everything was running smoothly.
Exhibition game, yeah.
How far before opening day was that game?
A few weeks.
A few weeks.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact timing, but it was after the spring training had started and much closer to when the regular season started, so it might have been a week before.
And how did you feel about where the stadium was at a week before opening day?
Other than the foul ball net, it was in pretty good shape.
So there weren't many things that you felt you had to touch up on from the time that game to opening day?
Well, we didn't have a lot of time to do it, but no, not a huge number. I mean, there's lots of little details. We might have been touch-up painting, both the steel and then the interior finishes. All that is a blur because of all the rest work I did for the rest of my career.
Right, so it seemed like Camden Yards was ready to take on 40,000 new faces on opening day in 1992.
It was.
Where were you on opening day, and what was your experience like with that?
Well, I took my son and my daughter and my wife, and it was a lot of fun. And I even have tickets for it I found in one of my files, but not that long after that, they had something called the baseball. And it was an event in the club level of the stadium. I think it was black tie. Yeah, I was pretty sure it was black tie. And my daughter was, at that point, was at 92, and she born 83, so she was 11 years old. But even at that stage, she was like 5'9" or 5'10", and looked older, but she didn't look my age. So I think people were wondering what I was doing with this very attractive young woman at the ball, but it was a lot of fun. She enjoyed it, I enjoyed it.
And did you feel proud of what you guys had put together for these fans, or did that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like I said earlier, it's the ballpark was was the highlight of my professional career. I did other interesting projects, but particularly with the stadium work after Oriole Park, it was less fun with everyone. A couple of them I'd say were fun and interesting, but in the later stages of my career, it's just I was done doing stadiums.
So you said before you got the Orioles job that you were mostly in hospitals and that you hadn't had much experience with sports and especially stadiums.
My company had, yeah.
Did that turn into your company's forte, the focus of your
Yeah, well, we've always done sports work, but again, a lot of sports construction, not very much of it got done in the 80s and maybe even the late 70s. I think we opened the Silver Dome. We did the Silver Dome in Pontiac, Michigan, I don't know, 72, 75, something like that. And we did the Metrodome in Minneapolis. So we had done big stadium projects. And I had proposed a project manager from, I want to say, the Metrodome to be the construction manager for Oriole Park. And then after we were awarded the contract into the project, he bailed on me. but I brought in Tom Rogers to do it. And Tom was a hell of a builder and had done lots of different types of projects, no sports, but a lot of different types of projects, so he was quite effective. But my stadium knowledge, personal stadium knowledge, multiplied 50 times or 100 times over the course of Oriole Park, and then I went on and did almost all stadiums for the next 12, 13 years.
So you took that experience that you gained with the Orioles and in Camden Yards, and you went out and created a lot of stadiums that had that Camden Yards feel.
Well, some did, but not all.
Right.
Yeah.
But while so many stadiums tried to emulate that urban city integration that the Orioles have, what makes the Orioles special compared to a lot of the newer stadiums that try to do the same thing?
Well, I think some of them have been quite successful. Oriole Park was the first. It successfully integrated the warehouse, the whole feel of the complex, the walkway, pedestrian walkway between the stadium and the warehouse, the entry coming in from the south, the cityscape, were all very successful and all very unique at that time. But after that, the ones that I thought were pretty interesting and pretty special were Coors Field in Denver, and then PNC Park in Pittsburgh, which I really think is a cool stadium.
It's beautiful there. Was there anything specifically taken from either of those two stadiums that came directly from Camden Yards?
There were, I think, the use of brick, the use of architectural precast or cast stone in both cases, the green color of the steel. Both stadiums are green. The attention to the details of irregular. The stadium footprint's not uniform all the way, and the foul lines are different. The outfield wall is different. Both of them have that same characteristic. But they were all designed by, both of those were, and others that I worked on were designed by HOK. So the learned experience came a lot from HOK. But by that point, I understood what they were looking for. So it was not an educational process for me. I knew what to do.
So speaking of the field of play and the walls in the back, I know the manager of the Orioles at the time, Frank Robinson, was a huge advocate for fair play. And whether you were a lefty pitcher or a righty pitcher or a power hitter or contact, the field had to be even for everyone.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't. Did that factor into your job at all, and how did that play out?
No. That was decided by the Orioles. They made those decisions. I think Frank got overridden on that one, and I'm trying to remember if Wrigley Field is irregular. I'm pretty sure it is, but Fenway Park in Boston certainly is.
Is there a particular story or memory from the project that you find yourself revisiting most often, and that you find yourself love telling at a dinner party?
Well, you don't want to be a bore at a dinner party, so I don't tell Oriole Park stories very much. I've had a lived experience since then, so there's a lot of other stuff that I've going on in my life. But I think the ones I told were pretty interesting. We had some very intelligent people on my team working on the project. One, a guy named Robert Rayborn, who's gone on and done way more stadiums than I ever did, who was extremely creative in figuring out how to build something that the architect or the Orioles wanted in the stadium. The best example of that I can think of, Rayborn is another guy to interview. He's a good, solid guy. The Oriole Park sign over the entrance is made of stainless steel. And we could not find a fabricator in Maryland who was willing to take it on. So Robert went up to Pennsylvania, searched around, find a guy, explained to him what we wanted to do, and then he fabricated that Oriole Park thing that's still there.
Is his name Tom Moore by chance?
No, Robert Rayborn.
Robert Rayborn.
Yeah, Rayborn.
So we know that the stainless steel, and obviously when a stadium like this is being built, there's a budget. Was the stainless steel a little more expensive than you had thought initially, and was it super important that it was real?
You know what?
stainless steel?
We had a signage budget, so it was not just the that sign. It was every sign in the stadium. I don't remember if we busted it or not, but the signage there is great. And we found a local firm, Triangle Signs, I'm pretty sure that's who they were, who had some who were very good at it, fabricating the signs, and did a great job on the signage thing. And in the scheme of things, I don't know what we paid for that Oriole Park sign, but it was not. It was certainly not in the neighborhood of busting any budget.
Right. So whether it was the foul post from Memorial Stadium or the green in the stadium that a lot of other stadiums emulate these days.
Yes,
is there
they do.
anything that you look back to now and think differently about than the average fan, maybe?
One of the virtues of Oriole Park, and there were subsequent stadiums that were done where I think this got lost, is they became more corporate. I think the National Stadium in D.C. is an example. That's what the Nationals wanted. So, but I didn't like that. I've been in that park several times for games, and I'm not a big fan of it. You have to move on, and let me go back. One of the virtues of Oriole Park is that ultimately, when you compare it with a lot of the more recent stadiums, it's simple. It may not look simple, but in a lot of ways, compared to what's being built now, it is. There's a degree of simplicity in it that I'd really admire.
So you did say that even though opening day hit, your job wasn't done.
No.
And that it was kind of an ongoing process.
Sure. Well, go ahead and finish your question.
Was there anything after opening day that became a huge issue or a factor for you, and what kind of work continued after opening day?
Punch list. There were issues that maybe the escalators weren't working as well as they should have or broke down. So there's routine maintenance, but also there were probably some adjustments that had to be made because the escalator runs there were quite long. Just a lot of fine details, and then contract closeouts. The closeout process, you have between us and there were a couple of guys who, Clark in particular, had a significant role in the project. They had a lot of subs, and when you have lots of subs, let's say at the end of the day, between direct contracts from us and subcontracts from Clark, there were 75 subs in the job. 15 of them will be absolutely outstanding. Never any problems. They do the job. They're there when you want them to be. They're not claiming every step of the way. Another, what am I down to? 50 are okay. And then you have 10, 5, 10 who are just an absolute pain in the neck. And so you have to get them closed out, settle their claims so it doesn't go to court. If they have them, settle them in whatever fair way we can. But that's routine on nearly every job I've ever done. So it wasn't unusual. It happened after that. It happened during Oriole Park. And Bruce is a good negotiator. So I would be in there, I would negotiate some of them, but Bruce did a lot of the negotiation because that was part of his role.
Right, so obviously there were plenty of decisions to be made, and when there was a decision to be made where there were opinions from both sides, you said you tended to look towards Bruce.
For the final decision? Oh yeah, that's who I reported to. Right. So he was getting input from the Orioles, from Herb Belgrade, who was the executive director, or the chairman of the Maryland Stadium Authority, an absolute class act. I'll tell you a short story about Herb in a minute. From the Orioles, from Herb Belgrade, from the architects in terms of what they wanted to do, and from us in terms of what we needed to do to make schedule and make budget. And then he would pull it all together, and I'd tell him what I thought he ought to do, and then he would do that sometimes, and then what he, based on other input, had to be done in another way at other times.
Was there anything that you really loved about the stadium, or something that you felt passionate about that didn't end up making the final cut?
Final cut. Oh, in terms of design? No. I built lots of different things. Some of the designs I built I didn't like them from the aesthetics point of view. Some of the designs I built were what I would call leakers, where you had, and I got to the point in my career where if I thought something had a potential to leaking, I'd bring an outside consultant on my own tab to go through the design and tell me what we needed to do to keep it dry. But didn't have any issue like that in Oriole Park that I remember.
So you almost had a 1 week buffer between the exhibition game and opening day.
1 week or two, whatever it was.
Right.
It wasn't a month.
Not enough to make any major changes, of course.
No.
On that opening day, and really just in general, what were your emotions like seeing all those people finally walking in and
A sense of relief.
relief?
Yeah, we got it done. We got it done, and the fans liked it. It was getting great coverage in the press. It was very pleasing. You know, you want to have your work appreciated,
Right.
and it was appreciated.
And relating to Camden Yards, we've heard the word home a lot. Was that the goal of what you guys wanted to build in Baltimore? I don't think I ever used that word, and I don't think of it in those terms now. I wanted to build a great stadium that fit into the city of Baltimore, and that was appreciated by all of the interest groups, and got done on time and in budget. I know you wanted to finish the story a second ago.
Oh, Herb. Herb, I didn't have a huge amount of contact with Herb Belgrade, but one time, a story I just came to me that I remember quite well. He was getting ready for a radio interview, and this was at a fairly crucial point in the project. I don't know whether it was a funding request, but coming up or whatever it was. And in the hours before the interview, we were all up in the Stadium Authority. He would shoot me questions, shoot Bruce questions, make some notes. And he was as nervous as a cat, absolutely nervous. So I don't remember, the interview wasn't where I wasn't in the interview, so I didn't see it, but I listened to it on the radio. And he was as cool as you could possibly be. And it really, really impressed me how he could, during the preparatory phase, it was just, oh. But then at the actual interview, he was just calm as possible. It was really impressive. That really impressed me.
And do you think that that's just how he was, and he would get anxious about it until the day came and he knew what he was talking about the whole time? Or was
I don't know. I don't know. But he was, I think, an extremely successful attorney. In fact, I know he was an extremely successful attorney. He was an extremely good chairman of the board. He allowed Bruce to. I wasn't privy to 99.9% of the discussions between Herb and Bruce, but as far as I could tell, he allowed Bruce to do his job. I think as he served as a buffer between Bruce and Schaefer, the governor. As an example, and I'm not sure, that's a long time ago, so I don't think anyone's going to care now. Whiting Turner is a very powerful presence in the Baltimore area. they're a local, big local contractor. They didn't have any stadium experience at that point, but they had teamed with Huber Hunt, who did. They're a big, at that point, Indianapolis-based contractor. They've gone elsewhere since then. And I'm pretty sure, in fact, I know that they probably reached out to the governor, whom the chairman of Whiting Turner knew quite well, about us getting the award for the contract. And I don't know how much Herb mediated in that process, but I think at the end of the day, he allowed Bruce's decision to stand. And so once they brought Bruce on board and he had demonstrated his competence, they went a long ways toward leaving him alone. And there was very little, as far as I could tell. Bruce probably has a different version of it, but as far as I could tell, almost no political interference in the project at all. Just get it done.
Right, and I mean that's amazing, and I feel like you don't hear that a lot today.
No.
A lot of the the big names, the owner, the governor, mayor, Edward Bennett Williams, Schaefer, Eli Jacobs. How did those three get along, and did you have any, comings and goings?
I didn't have a huge amount of interaction with him. I met Schaefer a few times, but not in connection with Oriole Park. I think Schaefer and Bruce got along pretty well. I think Schaefer had respect for Bruce, which is not hard to do. Eli Jacobs, I saw him at a distance, but I never formally met him. And Larry was running the team, and is a strong personality. And I don't think, and I think he was he had an aesthetic vision of Oriole Park that was derived from Wrigley Field, Fenway Park, and he had Janet on board to help him execute that vision. So I think at the end of the day, everybody got along pretty well.
Now, and I know it's so hard, if you were to take a second and try and put your experience with Camden Yards and how you feel about it into words, what would your message about Camden Yards be?
At this point in my life, it would be complex. I think it's a magnificent stadium, and like I said, that at the end of the day, a lot of the subsequent stadiums I thought had too many things going on design-wise, or had moved away from the aesthetic that Camden Yards embodied. The other issue that I've come to appreciate more, and I'm not a super fan of, is the extent of public financing of major league or professional sports facilities. They're important for cities in terms of bringing the community together, but at the end of the day, it's the team getting a hell of a deal and the community paying a lot of the bill. So for a major part of my career, I didn't care, or I overlooked it. But as I've progressed in some of these deals, or, Oriole Park, I don't remember the exact cost, but it might have been somewhere between 100 and 125 million. The renovations that are going to get done up there are budgeted for several times that. I don't remember. Coors Field was probably 175, 180 million. PNC Park was probably in the same ballpark. But now the projects are, we did Chicago Bears, and that ended up being 750 million. And then that seems to be the floor now. They're all more expensive than that. So part of that's inflation, but part of it is that these things have become very, very fancy. And so I'm very proud of what I my participation in Oriole Park, but I've begun to question the basis in which we're building these stadiums.
So you've heard about the new stadium with the Commanders?
I'm sure it's a couple $1 billion at least, $3 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, costs have gone up since Oriole Park was built, and the Commanders are actually going to finance a substantial amount of that. I don't remember what the split is, but typically when the team pays for it, the city will pay, or state or whoever will pick up the infrastructure surrounding the stadium. They'll probably agree to do the demolition of the existing stadium. I don't know what the split is going to be.
The Commanders are paying, I believe it's $2.6 billion, and the public is paying about $1.1 billion.
That's still a substantial amount of money.
But supposedly there's something in the deal that like they can negotiate it down for the public if certain standards are met.
Right.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
So the point of that was that the mayor is saying that they needed to reindustrialize that area anyway. So a part of this plan is to add 8,000 new apartment buildings, like new apartments, into that area.
It's a lot of that parking in 8,000 apartments. That's getting a lot of stuff into that site. You know, and my guess is it'll take up the better part of the parkland down there.
Right. So that seemed like the goal with Camden Yards, to create more foot traffic in the downtown area.
And I think it succeeded.
Right.
You know, one of the side effects of having done a lot of sports work is that I watch the Ravens. I love the Ravens. I watch almost no baseball. I watch almost no NBA basketball. I did with my son this past weekend. But it's so after all the sports work, meeting a lot of the owners, it's a business.
And I think, just to wrap up, I keep thinking about this. I was at the Orioles game the other day, and it was my first time going to Camden Yards as a fan. So, and we were walking around the stadium and looking at it, you have a great view of the B&O warehouse from really every seat you sit.
Every seat.
And it's such a big piece to the stadium now.
I'm not sorry they kept it.
There must have been some arguments about whether or not to keep it, because I know people were pretty animated about whether or not they wanted the harbor showing behind the warehouse, and if it was just going to be too much to keep up with.
You couldn't, I don't know if you could even see the harbor from the upper deck at Oriole Park, but in terms of creating an urban landscape apart from the harbor, I think keeping the warehouse was absolutely the right decision. But again, is it the most effective, efficient from a business perspective? No. Is it a beautiful piece of saved architecture? Yes.
Yeah, a couple of just last minute questions. A decision on the name of the ballpark came quite late. We wanted to know, and a sign had to be erected for that. Were there any challenges that came about as a part of that? Also, of course, there was the debate between, was it going to be Camden Yards or was it going to be called Oriole Park? And then, of course, the two coincided into one name. Do you have any stories about that?
I don't want to sound casual about it, but honestly, I didn't care what they called it as long as they told me what the name was so I could build the signs.
And you've mentioned, obviously, you've worked with so many different people throughout the process, each having their own
Role.
say
Yeah.
and their role in certain things. When you look back at it from your vantage point, who do you give the most credit to in terms of the vision and that final execution?
Janet Marie and Joe Spear.
Awesome. And we talked about your experience on opening day and you being at the exhibition game a few days before. Do you happen to remember your last walk through the ballpark before it opened to fans?
God, I did 100 walkthroughs. So the last one, no, not in particular. Are we ready for this opening tomorrow?
And certain people that we've interviewed throughout the process have talked about how, some people were, on opening day stressed that things wouldn't go very well. Kim McCullough said that she fell asleep during the game because she
was so tired.
She was so tired of working throughout the process. David Ashton said that he almost felt like people being in that place was like, I kind of don't like this. I kind of liked it when it was just like us in there. Kind of, what were your emotions of like? You mentioned that you were glad that it got done and people were able to enjoy it, but like, were there any other like, kind of be kind of sad to like leave this thing behind?
No, but you know what? I think it's a great piece of architecture, a great piece of urban architecture. When I walked in for opening day, I knew it was going to work, so I wasn't that freaked out by anything.
Then you mentioned you brought some of the.
Yeah, if you turn that off, I'm going to tell you one more story that I don't want in the recording.
Of course, before we turn it off, was there anything that you felt like should have been talked about with this project that we didn't?
No, you covered a lot of the stuff. It was again the highlight of my career, a tremendous amount of fun, and I'll never forget it.
Don't turn it off yet. So, Joe Spear and Janet,
Yeah.
tell us why.
Why?
Why do you ascribe the vision for the ballpark to Joe Spear and Janet?
There was Janet was carrying the message from Larry, and I think Janet had been doing a lot. I think her background is urban planning in New York City, and I don't know if you've ever read Jane Jacobs or any of the other urban planners who talk about the fabric of the city. But she came out, to me, she may not deny it, but she came out of that tradition. And so she had a vision. Larry had a very strong vision. And for the most part, that got articulated through Janet. And Joe, okay, this is your vision. Here's how I will accomplish that vision. And then there was negotiation about the details. But a lot of the vision came from Larry to Janet. Janet added her own view of it. And Joe added his piece of it. So I had a lot less contact with Larry, but so for me, the primary influences on the design were Joe and Janet.
You mentioned a little while ago that Larry was Janet's muscle. Those two must have been pretty close.
You have to ask Janet that question. I think they were. Larry passed away a year ago, something like that. He went on to be president of the Red Sox for a while, and then he was out in San Diego. And Janet ended up doing a lot of work for the Red Sox and was instrumental in coming up with the concepts for their renovation, scoreboard seating and so on. And then she went out and helped out quite a bit on the I think the Padres, and then subsequently she's been working pretty hard with the Dodgers for the last few years. So she's gone well beyond where I went in my career.
Well, Bob, I think this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.